Setup and gameplay of Whelps to Wyrms is actually a pretty simple process. First things first, everybody needs to pick the dragon that they'd like to play. There are 5 different colored dragons in Whelps to Wyrms, ranging in the basic chromatic flight. So you have black, white, green, blue, and red. Every player is then going to choose a dragon, take the appropriate action cubes, and the 3 different phases and stands for each dragon, going from whelp, drake, and to finally a worm. Place the stands, action marker, and your figures near your play area in front of you. Every other player will do the same. After all players have chosen an appropriate dragon and taken the action markers, player board, and figures for each, you're going to then set up the board. And that's going to start with the the nest tile here, and that's going to go in the center of the board. And then you're going to deal tiles around, starting at position 1 on the nest, around until you have an equal number of tiles as there are players plus 1. So in a 2-player game, you're going to be drawing 3 tiles to start the game. And again, you're going to start on position 1. So here we have a forest, we have some grasslands, and then finally a lake tile. Take the rest of the tiles and place them within all reach of players. Next, separate and shuffle the 3 improvement decks based on land type. And then you're going to draw 1 improvement for each available type of land that's out there starting the game. So for instance, in this case, we're not going to draw an improvement for the nest or the lake hexes. And we're going to draw 1 improvement for the forest and 1 for the grasslands. Now there's a caveat here. If you happen to draw a layer starting the game, you're going to shuffle that back into the deck and draw again. There will be no layers at the beginning of the game. So let's go ahead and do this here. So here I have a level 2 sheep farm. We're going to place that there on the grasslands. And we also have a merchant. Lucky us. And after the improvements are placed, we're going to go ahead and place the appropriate number of meeples on the board. So the merchant gets 1 merchant meeple, and then we're going to put 2 sheep according to the 2nd level sheep farm here on the farm. After the basics are set up in the game, every player is going to place their whelp on the starting position, which is the nest hex. Take the objective deck and find all of the end game bonus cards designated by this star here at the top of the card, and then take them out. These will be used only at the end of the game. And then deal 1 face-up objective equal to the number of players. So in this case, we're going to have 2 objectives starting things out, and we've got the Raise the Ruins and Raise a Fort objectives. Place this within reach of all players, and then deal 9 objectives. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Placing the remainder in the box and starting a draw pile near the rest of the objectives. At the beginning of each round, you're going to draw an objective, and when the last objective is drawn, that is going to signify the end of the game. So basically, you're going to play 9 rounds of play, really 10, because you'll get that last round after the final objective is drawn. Prepare your Slayers deck by shuffling your basic Slayers on top of the Epic Slayers here. And also place those within reach of all players. Create a supply for your other tokens, such as gold, wound markers, and dice, within reach of all players, so they'll be able to get those. You'll also want to separate your experience bag into people, cows, and sheep, along with your basic experience cubes here. Every dragon is also going to roll for initiative to see who's going to act first during each turn. The initiative will pass around the table from turn to turn. So if you act first this turn, you'll be acting last the next turn. Highest gets initiative. So after you're set up, the playing board should more or less look like this. Of course, we'll want more room here to be able to grow around the nest as we use our actions. Speaking of, let's look at an example player board and go through the 6 actions that you're going to be able to take on your turn. So every dragon will have a matching color player board, and they designate a couple different things. First, and maybe most importantly, are your actions here, which we'll go through in more detail later. You also have a stomach area where we'll be able to put things you eat throughout the game, such as delicious sheep and even better, more delicious people. Each source of food is worth a unique number of experience points, sheep being 1, cows being 2, and finally any humanoid being 3. There are also 3 different levels that the dragon will basically grow throughout the game, starting with Whelp and finally ending at Worm. As you advance through the different stages of life, you'll actually gain more movement, designated by this hex value here, and more action points, which you'll get and be able to do more things on your turn. So when you're starting out as a Whelp, you're able to move 1 hex and you have 2 actions. Remember, when you're playing Whelps to Wyrms, actions have to be unique. You also have a basic combat modifier here, starting with a Whelp being 2d6 and finally a Wyrm being 3d6, dropping the lowest value. So as you grow, you get significantly more lethal as you play the game. There are also 3 unique skills that can be purchased and unlocked using experience points throughout the game. Anytime during your turn, you're able to buy one of the 3 XP values in the appropriate level here, assuming you have the XP in your pool and you have that level unlocked. Now, skills can be unlocked at any point on level 1, but you have to at least be a Drake to unlock the skills in level 2 and a Wyrm in level 3. You also have to unlock the skill directly underneath the skill you're purchasing. So for instance, if I wanted to get Large Appetite, I would need to have first unlocked the second breakfast ability. Now there are 6 different unique actions that we're going to be able to take as we play the game of Whelps to Wyrms, starting with Attack. Attack allows us to do a couple things. 1, physically engage slayers that may be on the board, or physically engage a dragon. Now, a combat role is generally going to be dealt from a player playing as a dragon to a slayer. Slayers, and we'll get into that a bit later, but basically you're going to roll your combat dice. Whatever the value is you have on both dice will be applied. In the event that I'm attacking a dragon, both players will roll dice, and the highest player is going to be declared the winner. So in the event that you actually lose combat, you're going to have to roll a d6, and you're going to place a wound marker over the action that you roll. So in this case, I rolled a 3, which is my search action. In that case, I'm going to be wounded on search, making me unable to take the search action for the remainder of play until I have decided to pay gold and heal that action. Now, wounds are always determined based on loss of combat, whether it's a player versus player or a player versus slayer engagement. Now, there are also other things that you can do to potentially wound other dragons, or certain events that a slayer can wound you without you having to do really anything, either from a distance or an ability that would cause that to happen. When you decide to take an action, you place one of your player markers over that, letting all the players know that you've taken that action for that turn, and you're unable to retake that action unless a card or skill says so. The next action here is Eat. Eat is a very simple action, and it allows you to do one major thing, and that is consume livestock or merchants that are on your hex. Each Eat action allows you to eat 1 meeple worth of food. So for instance, if on my dragon's turn I decide to move here to the grasslands and then use my Eat action, I'll be able to consume 1 of the sheep there. The third action is Search. So if you're on a tile that doesn't already have an improvement and is not a nest or a lake tile, you're able to search and find another improvement on that tile. Now there are all sorts of different improvement cards, which we'll detail at the end of this video, but here again, you're going to draw the type of improvement that's matching the color of the hex that you're on here. So since we're on a forest hex, we're going to draw from the forest improvement pile. And in this case, we got a bandit camp. Bandit camps are unique in that they acquire gold every turn. So they make a very, very awesome proposition for you if you can raise this structure, which we'll talk about in a second. But each turn, this level 3 bandit camp is going to get 3 gold. The fourth action is Explore. And Explore allows us to take the top hex off of the land pile and place it adjacent to where we are now. Now, standard hex placement rules apply here in that it has to border the nest or border 2 tiles that are already placed. So we couldn't make a runaway and leave empty spots as we build out the nest. So to do that, we're going to go ahead and use our Explore action and place another set of planes here. Now, as we use our Explore and Search, we'll be competing for bonuses that are already designated through our objectives. Things like Discover a Bandit Camp or Discover a set of mountains. Those are ways for you to get additional gold as you play the game. The fifth skill is Raise. Now, Raise will destroy any improvement on the hex that you're at, assuming there is one there. Raise takes 2 actions and is very unique. So when you raise a building, if it's a bandit camp or a structure that has the ability to acquire gold, you're going to take all of the gold value there. In addition, you will also take any of the bonus gold that's on there. For instance, every farm is worth 1 gold when you raise. Bandit camps are unique in that they're worth 0 gold, but you get to take as many gold as on there. So the longer a bandit camp sits on the board, the more valuable it's going to be. The 6th and final action that each player has is the skill action. And skills allow you to use any active skill that you have purchased on your player board. So for instance, our red dragon's first ability is the 2nd breakfast ability, in which allows us to use our skill action to take another eat action this turn. So throughout the game, as you unlock and advance as a dragon, you'll get more powerful and have more options through the course of the game. One thing I didn't mention, anytime a dragon takes these search or explore actions, you take 1 basic XP cube and put it in your stomach. Now, you can also forfeit your action points if there's just nothing for you to do on your turn. For every action, for every action marker that you forfeit, you will also acquire 1 basic experience point. Now, to advance throughout the different stages of light is going to require experience. For instance, to become a drake, you have to have at least 4, and to become a worm, you have to have at least 8. Now, in doing so, you can pay for that in the experience points you gain on your turn. So it's possible to level between whelp to drake in 1 turn and take advantage of the extra actions and movement that you'll get. Movement is always free of charge and can be broken up in between your actions. So as a worm, you have the ability to move 1 space, eat a livestock using an action point, and then move 2 more spaces and raise a set of forts that are there, taking the gold and also acquiring another structure within your raised pile. So play will proceed clockwise throughout the game, with each dragon expending all of their action points that they may have, and then at the end of the turn, whoever has the initiative is going to draw the top slayer on the game board. So in this case, we've got a basic slayer here. I'm going to go ahead and draw, and we get the Lazy Mercenary. The Lazy Mercenary only has 1 ability, and it's called Bribe, which allows us to basically forego combat and give him a gold, and he'll just go away. Every slayer has a strength score designated by the red heart, and the amount of gold that you'll get, including their meeple, when you defeat them in combat. When you attack a slayer, or if a slayer engages you and you beat them in the combat, you immediately eat the slayer, acquiring both their gold and their meeple for experience points. Every slayer will have a unique slayer stand, and they'll start by being placed in the hex. You'll then roll 1d6 to determine where they travel to, or where they're traveling from, following the dots on the actual hex tile. In this case, we rolled a 6, which means that starting at position 6, they're going to go furthest away from the nest as possible. So it's like they're venturing in from the countryside and then moving in towards where they've heard dragons are. So since we're starting out the game, there's not very far that they're going to be able to move. Every slayer has a movement of 2, with the exception of a few, and any slayers who have unique movement properties, such as a more advanced movement or slower movement, or even the rooted keyword, which basically forces them not to move, will be designated here on their card. All basic slayers only have 1 ability, and the epic gold slayers will have 2 abilities. So in this case, the Lazy Mercenary is going to be able to move in 2, and the player controlling the slayer would be able to decide where they're going and who they're attacking. In this case, this is only a roll of a 7, so what I may want to do is move the slayer into the nest and decide to attack myself with it, which is the red dragon. I would then take these 2 dice, and make a combat roll. I get an 8. I beat the slayer's value of a 7. I then take a purple meeple and put it in my stomach, and along with 2 gold that slayer had them, and add that to my hoard. So slayers can be very, very deadly, but they can also be a great source of protein for hungry dragons in the wilderness. Once the slayer has been removed from combat, you're going to go ahead and discard their card along with their meeple stand until they are magically brought back to life somehow. Slayers will stay permanently on the board until they are defeated in combat, so it is quite possible throughout every turn of the game and through improvements you may find and have to fight multiple slayers in one time. So the game can get very hectic as this kind of builds out and expands, and you're getting into multiple engagements every turn. Again, after the Slayer phase, dragons will be able to directly engage Slayers by using the attack action. An objective card can be completed anytime on your turn if you happen to meet whatever the objective is. In this case, this objective is find a farm. So if I were to move over to this grasslands, use my search ability to look at the top improvement, and then pull out a sheep farm, I would be able to then claim this, sticking it by my player board, and this card itself is worth 2 gold at the end of the game. And remember, during Whelps to Wyrms, the more gold that we have, the closer we're going to be to actually winning when it comes down to it. So when there are no more objective cards left to draw, the game is over. And at that point, you're going to then check end-game scoring. You're going to first count all the number of gold that you've acquired throughout your play. You're going to then look to see who gets what bonuses. So if you happen to have the most structures raised here, you'd collect the most raised card, worth 3 gold. If you happen to have the most people in your stomach at the end of the game, you're going to get 3 gold. If you have the most cows, you'll get 4 gold. If you have the most sheep, you'll get a whopping 5 gold. And finally, if you were the first player to reach the status of worm in the game, you will immediately have completed this objective, getting an additional 3 gold. You can also get bonus gold throughout the game as you play by taking advanced skills such as Breaker of Things, which allows you to collect 1 extra gold anytime you use a raise action. Again, the raise action allows us to destroy any improvement on the hex that we're on. First thing we'll do is we'll spend 2 action points here on the raise skill to show that we're using it, and then we're going to remove any meeples on this, return them to the supply, and then finally place the structure under our raise section on our player board. This is important because at the end of the game, we'll be able to determine and get a bonus based on who's raised the most structures throughout the game. Anytime a player takes a wound, they're going to roll 1d6 and place the wound marker over that. Wounds can be stacked multiple times on a single action. So if I happen to get wounded on my 6 and then next time I acquire a wound, I roll another 6, I'm simply going to stack the wound markers on top of each other. Wounds come in 2 different flavors. First off, there is the normal wounds that you'll take, and then there is also poison wounds. Poison wounds are unique because if they are not taken care of on the next turn, they will have to roll 1 more wound, and this is going to be a normal wound for each poison wound that you have. So in this case, if I got poison wound on my skill, next turn I'd roll that and I'd be unable to take the attack action. At the beginning of every turn, a player can forfeit 1 gold per action that contains a wound marker on it to remove all wounds on that action. So in this case, if I wanted to get rid of my attack and my skill wounds, I would simply pay 2 gold back to the supply and then be able to remove these wound tokens. If you don't take care of your wounds, they will stack up and you will be limited on what you can do in your turn. So it's important that you keep, during the first part of the game, your eat action available along with your search and explore action, because those are very easy ways to get basic experience points and be able to level up as you play the game. Once you get to the worm status, you're going to be able to do combat a lot more efficiently, so you're going to want to keep your attack skill open. And as you acquire different skills throughout there, like Burninator for this instance, which is a passive ability that allows your raise skill to only require 1 action marker, which is a very, very powerful ability when you combine it with something like Breaker of Things, which allows you to collect 1 extra gold each time you use the raise action. This type of synergy, you can look at each player card, and every dragon in regards to skills have a separate build that you can look at and really have fun with when you start to think about the different talent structures as you acquire skills throughout the game. So as you can see with Whelps, there are 5 basic types of hexes. There is the nest, which there's only ever 1 of. There are 5 lake tiles in the deck. There are 7 mountains, 9 forests, and 11 plains. Now you're going to be able to get food the most on the different grasslands because the improvement decks are stacked as you kind of expect to find them in each countryside. So lots of farms here in the grasslands and the plains, lots of things like ruins and even some farms and bandit camps within the forest. The mountains, there's less things to eat but a lot more expensive things to find, like the potential to find lairs or even other sets of ruins. Let's take a look at some of the different improvements now. So here we are taking a look at some of the different mountain improvements. Here we have a lair which will get you 2 gold at the end of every round as long as you can control it. Lairs can be taken in a hostile situation by going to another player's lair and either raising it and removing it from the game board, or actually using a combat roll to defeat the dragon that may be on it, or simply using your attack action if it's undefended and simply putting your new player marker over that one. The ruins are a special item in that when you raise them, not only do you get a gold, but you also get 2 basic experience points. Forts are also another important structure that you'll find throughout the lands. Whenever you find a fort, it'll give any slayer on this hex a +1 to their strength. It can be raised for 3, but most importantly, when you find a fort, you're going to take the top card of the slayer deck and put them in the fort under your control, so that during the next slayer phase, you'll be able to activate them along with the next slayer coming out. Merchants are a unique improvement in that they're not actually a structure, so that there's nothing to raise. A merchant is simply basically a free humanoid meeple which can be acquired through the eat action, and whenever you do that, you also happen to get 3 gold. Merchants are static, they never move, and once a merchant is eaten, you basically will remove the improvement off of the game board itself. So you won't resupply a merchant during the beginning phase of every turn. In addition to sheep farms, we also have cow farms, which will again put a little cow meeple on there that are worth 2 experience points apiece. And finally, the bandit camps, which we've already talked about in this video, which will acquire gold throughout there. And they also have the unique ability called ambush, which will, if a dragon enters that hex for whatever reason, they will acquire 1 wound immediately. The last and final card here we have to talk about is Famine. Now, Famine is also another unique improvement in that it's not an improvement at all. It's very, very bad. Whenever you draw Famine, you're going to kill any livestock on any neighboring hex. So if I were to draw Famine here, pretending that this is not the nest, these sheep would die here. And it would prevent the basic resupply of that until the next turn. So you can potentially get rid of a lot of livestock whenever a Famine card is drawn. When looking at Whelps to Wyrms and how to play it, it's going to be played over 4 simple phases, starting with the ready phase. Now, during the first turn, the ready phase is going to be a little different because you've already done some of the work. The ready phase begins with the initiative step, and that is, during the first turn, the player who rolled the highest collects the initiative token. Now, they'll keep this near their player board, but every subsequent round, this token is going to be passed from player to player. After that, you're going to draw the top card of the objective deck and add it to the rest of the pile. In this case, we got Eat a Slayer. Remember, objectives can be completed by any player on their turn if they meet a requirement based on the objective. So on this turn, if I happen to move my white dragon here and defeat this guy in a combat roll, I'll be able to take his meeple, eat him, and thus eat a Slayer, and also be able to claim that bonus objective. And finally, the last step in the ready phase is to resupply. So what we want to do here is take a look at the improvements that are currently on the board, and such as this bandit camp here. This is a level 3 bandit camp. So what we're going to do here during the ready phase is add 3 more gold. If we happen to have eaten one of these sheep last turn, we'll take an additional sheep from the supply and place it on there now. An improvement can never go over what its maximum capacity is in terms of farm count. So if you're a level 3 sheep farm, you can have up to 3 maximum sheep. If it's a level 2, 2, and finally if it's a level 1, 1. The same goes for all cow farms. So after the ready phase is over, it now goes to players' actions. Starting with the player who has initiative, they're going to play until all of their action markers are used up, and they have decided to then pass their turn. Now, at any point during their turn, they're able to split their movement, use their actions, and then eventually be able to either advance throughout stages of life or even purchase skills. When a player is finished with their turn, they simply say pass, and then they get either any remaining action points they've left to use, basic experience points for, or play simply passes to the next player. Once all dragons have completed a round and have exhausted all of their actions, then we go to the Slayer step. Now, the Slayer step simply begins with the player who has initiative drawing the top card of the Slayer pile, then having the Slayer go onto the board, depending on that die roll, again, based around the hex, around the nest hex, and then being able to move all Slayers. Slayers move together simultaneously, but there are certain Slayers who may violate this rule, such as Lady Grey, who always acts last. The player who drew the Slayer or the player who controls the Slayer, and there may be a time when you have multiple Slayers that you're controlling every turn. Use your Slayers both offensively and defensively, and don't be afraid to put Slayers in certain positions that either move them towards an enemy you really want to hurt, or towards you because you think they'll be an easy conquest. Slayers are a great source of both experience points and gold when you get to the epic levels. So be sure you're really taking advantage of that, and you're not feeding players too much with easy Slayer kills. And the last phase of every round is simply cleanup. Really what you're going to want to do here is just make sure you're prepared for next turn. So if any Slayers happen to die, remove their stands from the board, put the Slayer cards in a discard pile if they've been destroyed, and then make sure everybody has the appropriate level of experience and gold at the end of the turn. And lastly, during the cleanup phase, you're going to want to make sure all of your layers score gold as you control them. So if you have a layer with an action point marker of your color on it, you're going to get 2 gold per layer. Add the gold to your hoard. And really that's it. You're going to play through those 9 rounds of play using your actions, trying to eat as many people as you can, trying to get as much gold as you can every turn, and the player with the highest amount of gold at the end of the game is going to be declared the winner. We'd like to thank you for taking a look at the Kickstarter campaign. Remember, I can't stress this enough, that the components that you're seeing here are a prototype version. Things can and probably will change from what you're seeing now in this print and play / prototype mode and what the final campaign is going to be released.